They told me I was trespassing on my own land. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. My boots, my tractor, my fence line, suddenly not mine anymore. At least according to a guy who had been in the county for, what, 5 weeks. I remember standing there, hand on the hood of my truck, staring at these bright orange stakes stabbed into the ground like somebody was marking a crime scene. Except the crime, apparently, was me existing where I'd been for 20 years. See, I'm not new to land, not even close. This place, 118 acres of open pasture out in eastern Montana, it's not just dirt and grass. It's my retirement, my backup plan, my peace of mind. Cattle graze easy here, water rights are solid, and the boundary line, well, it was always simple. Old barbed wire fence, been there since the late 60s, straight as a promise, and my deed? Clear as daylight. Boundary runs about 50 feet past that fence into what most folks would just call scrubland. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. And for 2 decades, nobody questioned it. Not neighbors, not the county, not even me. Because why would I? Then came the new neighbors. Ethan and Claire Holloway rolled in from Seattle with big smiles, big money, and even bigger ideas. Bought the ranch next door at full asking price. Didn't even negotiate. Which, around here, is already a red flag. They called it their sustainable living project. Solar panels, organic crops, permaculture buzzwords flying everywhere. And look, I don't care how people want to live. You keep to your side. I'll keep to mine. That's the unspoken rule out here. First time I met Ethan, I was out checking fence posts along our shared line. He walks up, all friendly, shakes my hand, says, "Hey neighbor, just want to make sure we're aligned on boundaries," and I told him. It's straightforward. Fence line's been there forever, deed runs about 50 feet past it. And he just nodded, smiled, said he appreciated clarity. Yeah, clarity. Fast forward about a month. I'm driving my tractor along that same stretch, sun just coming up, everything quiet, and then I see them, dozens of bright orange stakes, lined up like soldiers, cutting across my pasture. Not on the fence, no, about 40 feet inside my land. Each one tagged with this neat little metal plate. Property line, do not cross. I actually laughed at first. I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe a contractor got confused, but then I counted the distance, walked it, checked my markers, and nope. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate. So I call Ethan. Hey, what are these stakes doing on my property? No hesitation, no awkward pause, just calm, almost bored. That's not your land anymore. I remember tightening my grip on the phone. Excuse me. We had it surveyed, he says, like he's explaining the weather. The real boundary is where those stakes are. Now here's the thing. I've heard a lot of nonsense in my life, but that one hits different because it's not just wrong, it's confident, and confident wrong is dangerous. My deed says otherwise, I told him. And he chuckles, actually chuckles. Then your deed's outdated. Happens all the time. Maybe whoever owned it before you got it wrong. That right there. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a play. See, people like Ethan don't bluff unless they think they've already won. So I hung up, walked back to the house, poured myself some coffee. Black, no sugar, needed my head clear, and called Rachel. Rachel's been handling land disputes in this state for over 30 years. Sharp, no nonsense. The kind of person who can smell a bad claim before you even finish explaining it. I send her my deed. She reads it, quiet for a second. Then she goes, "If this document says it's yours, it's yours. But don't argue, prove it. Get a survey." Simple advice, solid advice. So I hire Caleb, licensed surveyor, been working these counties since the 70s, knows the land better than most folks know their own backyard. He spends 2 full days out there, checking old markers, running GPS lines, digging into county records, real thorough. No shortcuts. When he comes back, he doesn't even sit down, just drops the map on my kitchen table and taps it with his finger. "You're right," he says. And I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. But then he adds, "Actually, you're more right than you thought." I look at him. What does that mean? He leans back a little, crosses his arms. That fence, it's off, but in your favor. Your actual boundary isn't 50 feet past it. Pause. It's 55. 5 extra feet. Now, you might think, what's 5 feet? But out here, 5 feet over acres, that's real land, real value. And Ethan? He didn't just push the line onto my property. He still came up 5 feet short of the actual boundary, which means everything he staked, every single one of those orange markers, was sitting squarely on my land. At that point, it wasn't even a debate anymore. It was evidence. So Rachel drafts a letter, clean, professional, no emotion, attaches Caleb's survey, gives Ethan 14 days to remove the stakes and acknowledge the correct boundary. We send it, certified. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Yeah, that was wishful thinking. Because what came back wasn't an apology. It was a legal response from a high-end law firm out of Denver. And that's when things really started to escalate. Now let me pause the story right here for a second, because this is where a lot of folks get tripped up, and honestly, it's exactly how people like Ethan get away with this kind of move more often than they should. According to standard procedure, when there's a boundary dispute, the first thing that actually matters isn't who built what, or who feels like they own the land. It's the deed, the recorded documents, and any officially recognized survey tied to that deed. Everything else is noise. From a legal perspective, Ethan's move was aggressive, but not unusual. He commissioned a survey, planted visible markers, and started acting like that line was reality. Because here's the trick. If you behave confidently enough, most people hesitate. They second-guess themselves, maybe avoid conflict altogether. And that hesitation? That's exactly what gives the other side leverage. And here's where it gets interesting. This is a psychological trap. It's called assertive encroachment. You act first. You create a physical presence. You make it inconvenient for the rightful owner to push back. Stakes in the ground, fences going up, maybe even a structure or two. Suddenly it's no longer just a disagreement. It's a situation, and situations are harder to undo than conversations. But legally speaking, none of that overrides a valid deed backed by an accurate survey. Possession might be 9/10 of the law in casual talk, but in court, documentation is 10 out of 10 every time. And the moment Ethan brought in a big law firm and tried to push for a third survey, that told me something important. He wasn't trying to find the truth. He was trying to stall, complicate, and maybe pressure me into backing down or settling. The lesson here is, if you own land, especially rural property, you don't argue opinions. You document everything. You verify your boundaries. And when someone tests you, you respond with proof, not emotion. Because once this kind of situation escalates, it's no longer about fences. It's about who's willing to stand their ground and who understands the rules of the game better. And trust me, at this point, the game was just getting started. So when that letter came back from Ethan's attorneys, polished, expensive, full of legal fluff, basically saying their survey was certified, mine was questionable, and suggesting we all just agree to a third survey. I remember reading it twice. Not because it was complicated, but because it was so predictable. It wasn't about facts anymore. It was about pressure. Delay the situation long enough. Make it expensive enough, and maybe I'd blink first. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. I called Rachel, told her, we're done talking. And she didn't even hesitate. Good, she said, then we file. And just like that, it moved from a disagreement between neighbors to a formal quiet title action, which, if you've never dealt with one, is basically the legal system stepping in to say, all right, enough arguing, we're drawing the line officially. Now here's where things took a turn. Because while the case was crawling its way through the court system, paperwork, filings, scheduling, all that slow-motion legal machinery, Ethan didn't slow down. He doubled down. I drove out one morning and saw fence posts going in, not out, on the old line, not even along his own stakes, but deeper, more permanent, like he was trying to make the change feel irreversible. A week later, irrigation lines, bright blue tubing snaking across what was, without question, my land. And then the shed. Not a big one, nothing fancy, but framed, anchored, deliberate, the kind of structure that says, I'm planning to be here a while. Every time I confronted him, same attitude, relaxed, dismissive, almost amused, like I was the one being unreasonable. Relax, he'd say, leaning against his truck like this was all some casual misunderstanding. Once this settles, it'll all make sense. And then that line again. Possession is 9/10 of the law. He really believed that, or at least, he wanted me to believe that he believed it. But what he didn't understand was that every post he planted, every pipe he laid, every nail he hammered into that shed, he was building evidence, not ownership. Months passed, 4 of them, to be exact, long enough for the seasons to shift a little, long enough for the frustration to settle into something quieter, sharper. And then finally, court day. We walked into that courtroom. Rachel beside me, calm as ever, files in hand, and across the room, Ethan and Claire, dressed sharp, their attorney flipping through documents like he was about to give a lecture, and presiding over all of it, Judge Eleanor Hayes. Now, here's something you learn real quick. Judges who come from rural backgrounds, they don't have a lot of patience for land games. And Judge Hayes, she grew up on a ranch. You could tell just by the way she looked at the maps, not confused, not impressed, just focused. The argument started. Ethan's side went first. Long explanation about their survey, how it was modern, how previous boundaries could have been misinterpreted, how land records aren't always perfect. It sounded good, polished, the kind of argument designed to create doubt, not clarity. Then Rachel stood up. No theatrics, no raised voice, just facts. She walked through my deed, line by line, then Caleb's survey, then county records, tying everything together so cleanly it almost felt boring. Except it wasn't, because it was solid. She didn't try to out-talk them. She just out-proved them. And then silence. Judge Hayes looked down at the documents, flipped a page, then another, and I swear, the whole room just held its breath. Finally, she set everything down, looked straight at Ethan, and said, plain as day, the plaintiff's survey aligns with the recorded deed and county records. Pause. The defendant's survey contains material errors. That was it. No drama, no long speech, just a clean cut. She ordered Ethan to remove all encroachments, the stakes, the fencing, the irrigation, the shed, everything, within 21 days. 21 days. Now, you'd think that would be the end. Court rules, you comply, that's how it works. Except, Ethan didn't. Day 1, nothing. Day 7, nothing. Day 14, still nothing. By day 21, not a single post had been touched. And that right there, that's where his confidence crossed into something else, something reckless. Because court orders? Those aren't suggestions. So on day 22, I showed up. Not alone. Rachel was there. Caleb too. And a full work crew. Guys who knew exactly what needed to come down and how fast it could be done. We'd already notified the sheriff's department. Everything by the book. No surprises. Caleb started first, marking the true boundary with official survey stakes. Not bright orange guesses, real, documented markers. Then the crew moved in. Posts came out of the ground one by one. Wood cracking, nails screeching as they were pulled loose, irrigation lines rolled up, like garden hoses, and that shed? Took a little longer, but not much. It's funny how something that took weeks to build can disappear in a couple of hours. And right on cue. Here comes Ethan and Claire. Truck pulling up fast, dust kicking behind them. Doors slam, and Ethan's already yelling before he's halfway across the field. What the hell do you think you're doing? Red face, veins popping, pointing like he's trying to stop the whole thing with his finger. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. I just reached into my jacket, pulled out a copy of the court order, and handed it to him. You had 21 days. He barely looked at it, just kept going. This is destruction of property. You're gonna pay for this. And Rachel? She steps forward, calm as ever. Actually, she says, you were ordered to remove these structures. You chose not to. This is compliance. That word, compliance, hit him harder than anything else. Because in that moment, it wasn't his land, it wasn't his call, and it definitely wasn't his leverage anymore. Still, he tried one last move, filed an emergency motion that same afternoon, attempt to stop everything, claim damages, flip the narrative. But Judge Hayes didn't even blink. Denied it same day. And then, the part that really closed the door. She ordered Ethan to cover all costs, legal fees, survey expenses, and an additional $4,500 for labor. And just like that, it was over. No more stakes, no more arguments, no more pretending. Just a clean line, where it had always been. Now here's the part nobody really talks about. Not the court win, not the money, not even the satisfaction of seeing your land cleared again. It's what comes after, the quiet. Because when all the noise fades, The arguments, the paperwork, the tension. You're left standing in the same field, same fence line, same stretch of land. Except now, it feels different. Not because the land changed, but because you did. I remember walking that boundary a few days later, just me and the wind, boots crunching over dry grass, nothing but open sky, and that old fence running off into the distance. And yeah, the new survey markers were there, clean and official. But what stuck with me wasn't the line. It was everything that had to happen just to defend it. See, people think situations like this are about land, but they're not really. They're about perception, control, and how far someone is willing to push when they believe they can get away with it. Because let's be honest, Ethan didn't start with a lawsuit. He started with confidence, stakes in the ground, a calm voice on the phone, a casual dismissal of my deed like it was just an opinion. And for a lot of people, that's enough. That's where they hesitate, where they think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should just avoid the headache. And that hesitation, that's the opening. This is a psychological trap. It's built on pressure, on creating just enough doubt and inconvenience that the other person backs off. Not because they're wrong, but because they're tired. But here's the thing. From a legal perspective, none of that matters if you're willing to follow through. And I don't mean yelling louder or arguing harder. I mean doing the unglamorous stuff, pulling records, hiring professionals, documenting everything, and letting the system do what it's designed to do, even when it's slow, even when it's frustrating. According to standard procedure, property disputes are resolved with evidence, not attitude, and that's something a lot of people either don't understand or hope you don't understand. Because the moment you shift from reacting emotionally to responding with proof, the whole dynamic changes. Suddenly, it's not a debate anymore. It's a process. And processes, they don't care who sounds more confident. Now, here's another layer to this. And this one matters just as much. Pride. Because if you strip everything else away, that's what kept Ethan going. Even after the evidence stacked up, even after the court ruled against him, even after he was given a clear, simple path to walk away clean. He didn't take it. Why? Because backing down would mean admitting he was wrong. And for some people, that costs more than money. So instead, he pushed, delayed, escalated, and in the end, all it did was make the consequences heavier. Legal fees, labor costs, a judge now watching his every move. And probably the worst part? Reputation. Out here, word travels, maybe not fast, but it sticks. And being known as the guy who tried to take someone else's land, lost, and still refused to comply, that follows you longer than any court case. The lesson here is know what you own and know how to prove it. Not just in your head, not just by memory, but on paper, verified, documented, solid. Because land doesn't argue, people do. And when they do, the only thing that matters is what you can stand on when everything else gets challenged. Also, don't underestimate how quickly a small issue can turn into something big. This started with a few stakes. That's it. Could have been resolved in a day, one honest conversation, one shared look at the records, done. But when ego gets involved, when someone decides they'd rather win than be right, that's when things stretch, escalate, and eventually snap. And here's something I want you to think about. If I had ignored those stakes, just driven past them, told myself I'd deal with it later, what happens then? A few weeks go by, then a few months, structures go up, usage becomes normal. And suddenly, what was clearly mine starts looking debatable. That's how these situations grow roots. Not overnight, but slowly, quietly, until they're harder to pull out. So yeah, sometimes the best move is the early move. Address it, document it, handle it before it turns into something bigger than it needs to be. And one more thing, you don't have to be aggressive, but you do have to be firm. There's a difference. Aggression escalates. Firmness resolves. I never yelled, never threatened, never stepped outside the process. I just stayed consistent. And in the end, that's what held. So if you're watching this and you own land, or even if you're just dealing with a situation where someone's pushing boundaries, literally or figuratively, ask yourself, do you know where your line is? And more importantly, can you prove it when it matters? Because someday someone might test it. And when they do, you'll find out real quick whether you're standing on assumptions or something a whole lot stronger. All right, that's my story. Now I'm curious, what would you have done in that situation? Would you have handled it differently or the same way? Drop it in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. And if you want more real stories like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. Because trust me, this kind of thing happens more often than people realize.